right, welcome to Settled on the Field. Liz, Jeb, today I'm happy to say we're joined by an awesome guest again. We've got Andy Riise here. He's currently an NFL mental performance and leadership coach. Unfortunately, he graduated from West Point. We're going to forgive him about that. He did play Army football, former fullback like myself. He retired from the Army. He went on to be a presidential leadership scholar, co-host of the Skull Sessions podcast, founder of Design to Perform Consulting. Andy, how are you doing on this fine Navy Friday?
Hey, beat Navy, and then hey, shout out to Brendan Mullen. We all have him in common. The kicker, my man down in Austin too, because
B. Mullen.
He's the link that brings us all together. Hopefully, he's going to listen to this one between his busy schedule. Who just recently moved. A shout out to Team Mullen down in Austin and South Bend, Indiana.
Shout out to Brendan. Yeah, we all love Brendan here on our pod, even though he was an Army guy. We forgive both of you for that.
I was Brendan's holder for high school football when he was our kicker at Adams High School.
Let's go. Did you pull like the whole Peanuts thing to where you you pulled the ball from him like Lucy a couple times, or he fell on his face?
I never got to pull the ball away from him, but he did pull me out of class sometimes to work on snaps. So he would throw me balls, and I was a lineman, but I played baseball, so he would have me out there and during whatever class, and we'd work on snaps. I did throw for a 2-point conversion though, so that was pretty cool.
There you go. That's awesome.
Yeah, sports guys get out of class all the time. That's just not right.
Get overs.
I'm pretty sure we ran a fake punt with him as well. I was the up man and faked it to somebody, and then I don't know what happened. I got clocked on the play coming around in before I could pitch it to him, but. I see you got a Blackhawks jersey on or a little shirt. I like that.
Go Hawks.
I understand you're representing the Chicago sports now. Can you give us a little background on how you got hooked up with the Bears?
Yeah, absolutely. So Design to Perform is my consulting company, and I'll get into a little bit more about my background, how I got there. But the Chicago Bears were my client last year, and I was the Jerry Maguire of sports psychology. I had one player. And so, and we actually joke around this one player. I won't say his name, but it was great. He was my Rod Tidwell, and it was all about showing him the money. I mean, in terms of his performance on the field, did really well. And Ryan Pohl's GM and some of the other leadership on the staff liked the results, thought it was a good fit. Position came open as a mental performance and leadership coach. And here we go. So this is my first season full-time with the Bears. And I'm just so honored to be with that franchise and helping build that amazing culture and bringing it back to prominence where it deserves to be. And we're really close, building a really cool culture and just learning and earning. And we can talk more about that later on. So bear down.
Go Bears.
Yeah, let me tell you, I got 4 posters from the 85 Bears in my basement up on the wall, and I would love to put some 2024 posters up, Let's bring them back.
Yeah, me too. My wife's family's from the Chicago area, even though she grew up in Texas, and Sweetness and Matt Suey were like 2 of my favorites. Now, I was number 34 at West Point because of Sweetness and Walter Payton, and so, yeah, it's really a dream come true in a lot of different ways.
Now, where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Texas?
No, I grew up in Northern California, actually, and born and raised in a little town called Oakdale in the Central Valley, San Joaquin Valley, and which actually, like, people think of California and surfing and maybe the mountains, I guess, but you could probably cut it out and put it in Texas. I mean, it was very agricultural. You got cowboys and rodeos and pickup trucks, and so I'm at home here in Texas, and so. This is like a whole state of Oakdale, California, to me, where I'm from. So that's where I'm originally from, born and raised, proud of it. And then got the opportunity to play fullback for Army and went to the prep school with where I met Brendan Mullen and the rest of my teammates and really close friends that I consider my brothers. And it really kind of launched my football journey and also my work in sports psychology.
Now, do you remember your recruiting journey or how you ended up choosing the Army? Like, what was that process like? I'm sure it's so different now.
Yeah, I wasn't highly recruited. I switched high schools my sophomore year, so it was kind of a tragedy situation. So I have 4 sisters. My oldest sister Tiffany was an Army officer. She was in Desert Storm with my brother-in-law Christopher Walter. he was an Army Ranger, and then he had switched to become a Black Hawk pilot, a helicopter pilot. They were at Fort Hood, it's called Fort Cavazos now here in Texas, had just gone there. And they had, unfortunately, there was a home kind of invasion incident outside their home. And he ended up dying. He ended up being killed tragically. And so she came home and was really struggling with PTSD. And we weren't really calling it back then too, but came home with my 6-month-old nephew now, who's, now in his 20s and lives in Chicago. But long story short is that when, my brother-in-law, Chris, I was really close to him. I really looked up to him because I said I didn't have any brothers. And ironically, the last time I saw him before he died, he was talking about playing football and going to West Point, which I didn't know what it was. And one of his really good friends graduated in 1988, and he had played football, and it was his stick buddy. So when he went to flight school, there's a guy who trained with him, a guy named Brother Ratliff. Well, his wife Christy came out to visit us, and so I ended up switching high schools to live with my sister just because, she just was really struggling with her anxiety and depression, and would wake up in the middle of the night. And so, for me to be closer to home, I was going to a Catholic school, about 30 minutes away. So I came to my hometown high school, switched sports, and really was a late bloomer. And so by the time I started having a really great senior year, I really was a little undersized for being a fullback. I had a great senior year, but I didn't have a lot of game film. I got recruited by a bunch of Ivy League schools. But
sounds familiar.
Yeah, right. And so I didn't have, which is funny because I didn't really have that great of grades. And honestly, my coach, I think, wasn't a big help on my recruiting as well too. It just there wasn't a lot of prospects that came out of my high school at that time, even though we had a really good program. It was really on the rise, and it's one of the better programs in the state now. But at the time, it just wasn't the case. And you would remember you'd mail out VHS tapes. It wasn't
VHS had to send them.
Yeah, and there wasn't a lot. So I wasn't on the radar for a lot of Pac-10 schools. I thought I might be walking on. I met a guy through Christy Ratliff. Brother Ratliff got my tapes. He gave it to his teammate Mike Sullivan, who was an Army officer, graduated from West Point with him, and then he came in and recruited me. Ironically, Mike Sullivan is a quarterback's coach for the Steelers now, so we're both West Point grads in the NFL now, which is crazy. Awesome. Almost 30 years later. But yeah, my math grades sucked, but I went to the prep school, and that was my opportunity. It was great. It was like a redshirt year. And so that was my opportunity to really go to West Point, but it really was kind of this struggle for me because academically, I just really was out of my league. And I think I was pretty immature as well, too. I had a great year at the prep school. I think that's when I peaked. I rushed for almost 1,000 yards. I was the MVP on the offensive side. But, academically, I was like on the borderline math wise. And so I didn't get my nod to go to West Point until the day of graduation. And so on the very last day we're going to graduate, I was getting ready to go back home and walk on to Fresno State. At the time, probably play linebacker. They didn't even have a fullback. And so, but I got this last minute, stay of execution. I got my golden ticket to go to West Point the day we graduated. And, but that just really kind of started this idea of the struggle, right? And going through becoming resilient and overcoming adversity. And then when I went to West Point, it's a crucible that's designed to beat you down. And so same thing, academically, militarily, athletically, athletically was kind of my solace, but I switched positions my sophomore year. Sophomore year, it's called your yuck year, because it's like a bad taste in your mouth. You're really yearly, and we call it yuck year because it sucks. But my coach at the time knew I was struggling mentally, so he referred me to this really unique center called the Center for Enhanced Performance. This is actually in 1989 where sports psychology came into the military, and now the Army is the largest employer of sports psychologists in the world. Yes, I know what you're going to say, Bill, because I'd say they need it more than the Navy, but the reality
beat me
is
to it.
Yeah. So the reality is I stole that joke right out of you. So
hey, we can all use it. We can all use it.
It's survival mode, but I didn't realize at the time, and it was kind of helping me, really develop those intangibles of leadership. And then 9/11 happened after we graduated, and Brendan and I and our classmates were now in a wartime Army. 3 years later, I'm leading a 500 vehicle convoy in the Thunder Run across Iraq as an artillery officer. And that's really when, I realized that combat's a thinking person's game. And those skills, those mental and emotional and social skills, those intangibles that I was developing, as a young athlete, Army football player, not only helped me on the on the football field, they helped me on the battlefield. And so that really kind of, that experience is what really kind of gave me the aha moment that, hey, this is a set of skills that I not only need to train myself as a leader and my soldiers, but like, there's a lot of people who need this who don't have access to it.
Yeah,
absolutely. It sounds like the Army was really ahead of their time there.
And that's what's really cool too, because I no sooner came back after my second deployment, I got the opportunity to go back and teach at that same center, and that's when the Army was really exporting this program because in 2009, we're now at war in Iraq and Afghanistan. I had my second deployment. I was training, advising, assisting the Iraqi Army. Saw a lot of combat, and again, that mental game just really was serving me well. I was exploring that. But I got the opportunity to go back at West Point to go teach. And the captain who's in the Army was an officer, was now a colonel and a PhD, and he brought me back. And so at the time, we had more soldiers killing themselves than were dying on the battlefield. And so our national leadership said, what are we going to do about this? So they brought together this task force that brought together the existing military programs and the academic leaders in resilience. And we developed the Army's resilience program, which ended up becoming the Comprehensive Soldier Fitness Program. And I was the first resilience trainer. Went back and got my master's degree in exercise psychology with emphasis in sport and performance. And so I really kind of started to become this expert in psychological offense and psychological defense is what I call it too. So the offense is the performance side. That's executing tasks, doing your job, on and off the field, obviously in the sporting context, or work at home in the business context. And then we started to export that out too. And so then after that, I went and spent about 5 years with Special Forces, which was really cool because now they're developing this elite tactical athlete program where they're bringing in the best and brightest from sports psychology and from strength and conditioning, physical therapy, athletic training, kind of like the sports model that we were used to, Bill, that you and I know, and it's more prevalent now. But the Army started adopting that at the elite levels. And at the time, they didn't have any contracted sports psychologists. So I started working with Green Berets as I just came back from Iraq. But my main job is jumping out of airplanes with those guys and, calling in airstrikes, calling in artillery, really being their big stick from a firepower standpoint. And went to Afghanistan with them, helped stand up a Special Forces unit from scratch, but really kind of laying the blueprint of what that looked like, in the 7th Special Forces group. I also served later in the 10th Special Forces group as well too, as their fire support coordinator. But my whole career kind of had this has this theme, a couple themes. I mean, one is health and human performance, and I didn't really consider myself a pioneer, probably until other people started calling me that tough, or because it's really kind of really expanded and deepened since I helped start some of these programs, and I was really at the ground floor level, which was really a lot of luck, but something I became passionate about. And the other one was just building things and helping develop and serve and lead people, right? And so bringing those worlds together was really important to me. Knowing my military service for 20 years, like you, Bill, but it also kind of like led me in a roundabout way to what I did when I retired.
Andy, your military career is just absolutely fascinating, and I thank you for your service and everything, Bill. You guys, I mean, anytime my brother-in-law is a Marine, and anytime I'm around you guys or my brother-in-law or any military families, it's just a blessing to know everything that they've sacrificed to get to just to get through. But man, the technical skills you guys have all developed is just fascinating. And it's really a testament to our country and you guys just for pursuing, with your passion. And it's just so cool to hear those stories. And thank you for sharing them.
Thanks, Jed. Yeah, I'll say too, I mean, it's one of the reasons why I stayed as long as I did, because, like a lot of people, like a lot of athletes, I went to West Point to play ball. It was the only scholarship I had, but I knew I wanted to get first class education, and being an Army officer was really an afterthought. It was like kind of something I was going to do to pay back, my really expensive education. But I ended up loving it because one, I mean, it was the ultimate team sport to me. It felt like football. There's a physical element of it. There's the team element of it too. There's the leadership element of it. And I had some great leaders, and I had some amazing soldiers, and I just kept on getting these great opportunities. And I just want to give a shout out to my wife too, because soldiers don't, I mean, as you know, Bill, I mean, hey, we don't do it by ourselves. And have my wife, and military spouses everywhere, want to give a shout out to them, because I wouldn't have been able to do what I've done and still be try to be a world class father is my important performance. Had it been my amazing
100%.
wife, Kate, because she gave up her amazing career as an architect to really be the CEO of our household, moving every 2 years, raising our 4 kids while I'm gone a lot. And then continuing to do that, when I'm pursuing my big league dreams after I retire. And so I just want to say, hey, there's a lot of people, you don't have to wear a uniform to serve. There's a lot of people that go into that. I think coaches and anybody who's trying to give back to their community is a service. So you don't have to wear a uniform to serve.
So with your, new gig here with the Bears, but also in the past year with the Cincinnati Reds.
Yes, sir.
So one of the things we were kind of wondering, Bill always talked about how in the military, you're kind of always a walk-on. Every time you go to a new team, new unit, you have to basically prove yourself to each group.
Yeah.
So, I'm not sure where I saw it, or Bill told us when you were at the Reds, you did a lot of listening and just like learning from what they were going through and to see how you could help them. So if you can kind of just explain how that works on your end.
Yeah, I mean, so when I retired, I went into Major League Baseball, because that's what soldiers and sailors do, right, Bill? I mean, that does not happen.
First day out, you get $100,000 and you start working for a sports team.
Yeah, that does not happen. I mean, so I don't want. I'll explain how that happened, right? So, sports psychology was not popular. It's still not mainstream, but there weren't any jobs back 20 years ago. It's been around for 150 years, but baseball was the first. We had all these DoD contracted civilians who are now the kind of the first wave of people who are now all over the military. So the military is hiring all these people, and then baseball started hiring kind of the first wave of people coming to the military to go into baseball. So 2015, one of my really good friends was with the Mariners. I would get off work with my uniform on and go up and go into the clubhouse and talk to, there's at least 4 Hall of Famers, at a leadership lab. And it was supposed to be a one-time guest spot like this. And it ended up being, and it was in a supply closet, which is so cool. I go up there, work with, King Felix Hernandez. I'd work with Kyle Seager. I'd work with Robinson Cano and Nelly Cruz. And we're talking leadership. And that was my first time where I was like, man, this would be really cool to maybe do this for a living. And so that planted the seed. So when I got out, one of my really good friends, Doug Chadwick, who was also an Army football player, retired Army officer, was the director of the Center for Enhanced Performance, and my next door neighbor at West Point, one of my really good friends, shout out to him, Dr. Doug Chadwick, has been with the Rockies, and he got hired on with the Rockies. And so he brought me on as an intern. And so now what's really cool is the military does an internship program where they cut you loose about 6 months before you retire. It was right before the pandemic when I left. I was very fortunate. I was able to move during the pandemic. I was supposed to go out to spring training, and then that all of a sudden got canceled. You remember the lockdown happened. So I did it all remote, and then the Rockies were not hiring that year. So the next year, I'm now in the inner circle because Doug was actually really active in, Major League Baseball performance psychologist. So he floated my name to the Reds, who were starting their program. And Tyler Klein, shout out to him, he hired me and gave me my first opportunity with the Cincinnati Reds, which I'm forever and indebted to them. And they brought me on, and I asked a really good friend to answer your question about, I'm a military guy and I have all this black belt experience, right? And so I think one of the mistakes that guys make is that, especially guys, and Bill, you and I could talk about this for days, is that we don't know what we don't know, but hey, we also get out and we think that our knowledge, skills, and experience is going to automatically translate to, and people are going to recognize that. And that's definitely not the case. I learned that a little bit the hard way.
It's nearly the opposite.
It's
right?
Exactly the opposite. You're starting over again. It's literally, and I call it the white belt mindset. And there's a story behind this. Maybe I'll tell if we have later on, but one of my mentors at West Point told this story about wearing your white belt. I mean, you could have a black belt skills, but you have to have a white belt mindset. So you have to enter in as a novice. And what that means as to begin again, over and over again, right? And now my theme is learn and earn. And so like, I have to learn, that, hey, I am new and how other people see me. And the first thing I got to be able to do is learn the people develop connections, develop rapport. I have to learn I call them the unwritten rules of the road, because every culture has them. And I have to learn how to navigate the complexity of the human terrain in the organization, right? And that takes time. That takes patience to be able to do that. And then you also have to earn trust. That is the absolute foundation. And the way you do that is by just shutting up and listening and asking questions, right? And asking a lot of questions, and don't assume anything. And then slowly and surely, like water over a rock, or like pounding the stone, however you want to say it, by learning and earning, for me. And again, I've learned this the hard way, because I was a fullback. I was bringing my own block and making stuff happen. And, hey, I was very impatient, because that's the military mindset. Hey, if there's a way, I'm going to find a way. There's no obstacle. I'm going to go over, I'm going to go through, I'm going to make it happen. And I'm on a timeline, because we're at war and I don't got time to screw around. And as a fullback, that just fed my aggressiveness and my impatience, right? And I didn't know how to let the game come to me. Well, I feel like, thank God I got that advice and I approached it that way. I mean, I taught no mental skills with the Cincinnati Reds. It was none of that. And it was cool. My leadership put no pressure on me to try to add value right away. It was all about hanging out with the guys and getting to know them, even through the language barrier, sitting down, having lunch and coffee, and going out and hanging out and watching BP and shagging balls, and taking on coaches and taking them on hikes, which the Phoenix area is beautiful, and going and having coffee, and, just doing the things and being a good dude. And I think for me, good dudership precedes good leadership and everything else, And so by then, just knowing who I was, by the time the season started and I started my rotation to go around the affiliates, I now was a familiar face. And so now now I could go and start teaching mental skills, because I had this foundation of rapport and trust. And so for me, this feels like the second time I went to a special forces unit, this elite unit. And the first time I went to special forces unit was the same way. My learning curve was like this, and I did it right, just like we did with the Reds. I learned a ton, but by the time I got a chance to go back to another special forces unit, I knew exactly what I wanted to do and how I wanted to be able to do it. And this, in a lot of ways, with the Bears, feels like my second stint with special forces. I mean, they literally are. There's a lot of people who are not Bears fans who are going to say you're full of shit, Andy. But pro football is the special forces of sports. I mean, it is in so many different ways, because they're so similar in terms of the makeup. I mean, I literally can, besides maybe the body size, but it feels like I'm working with Green Berets and in a lot of different ways. And of course, they love to hear that too. But there's so many similarities between those two. I could go on and on about that too. But just to answer your question, to kind of double down on that, wearing your white belt, learning and earning, and letting the game come to you was I won't say it's a secret. It's not a secret, but it was my approach and the work that I put in terms of how I thought and how I treated every situation. Even though people look at my resume and they're like, man, no, I don't, nobody gives a shit. You got to earn it every single day. And that's what I plan on doing. And I will continue to do.
Dude, that's
awesome.
a fantastic double down there. And you mentioned the internship that the DoD has, the DoD Skill Bridge. We actually started that at Krista's Health and have several people come in, and guess what they want to do? They want to start at the top. And so we have to get that across. Then let's just start in the middle rung, learn what's going on here, and then over time you can work your way up, just like you did in any of the military situations that you're in the past.
I wish Bill. I'm starting to read "The Ego is the Enemy" by Ryan Holiday, and I think that should be mandatory for all retired. I'm talking lifers like you and I. Yeah. Every lifer should have to read that book before they get out of the military. Right, because it's check your ego at the door, because we got an ego like we like it or not, because we think we don't have an ego, but everybody has ego. And it's not good or bad, but it's something that will trip you up if you don't calibrate things in real time.
I agree. I'll get it.
Was your internship at the IHSAA part of that?
Yeah, so I did that when I transitioned out. So more similarities, transitioned out right before COVID. But I went to the IHSAA, the Indiana High School Athletic Association, and learned some of the back ends, how they manage sports and whatnot.
That's cool.
But yeah, so, and that brings us to, I guess I'll throw it out here now, is we're starting a nonprofit, which is called Vets to Refs.
Love it.
We're looking to get just another pathway for veterans to know that it's there, that, hey, you sign up, you can become a sports official in any sport. You can get back into your community. If you don't have to be transitioning. You could be active duty. You could be 5 years out, like almost myself, and say,
Right.
I need to help my community. I want to participate in sports again. It helps with your athleticism and your health and all that. And
Yeah.
I bet you could probably touch on how it might help your mental health or your mental fitness,
Absolutely.
dealing with your regular job.
Yeah, that was one of the things I'm really excited to learn more about that, because I think refs and coaches have such an important place in our society, especially in places where they're underserved, where young people have come from broken families, or maybe they don't have the best examples. And oftentimes, coaches become father and mother figures, right? And they're not just coaches; they're mentors, because they spend a lot of time with our kids. And one of the things I realized in Texas when I went to the coaching academy, they had this mission of not only helping undergrads and graduate students educate them, but they also had this outreach mission to help with the Texas High School Coaches Association. It's kind of like what the one in Indiana, like every state has that, right?
Right.
Yep. What was interesting is that there, and I'm sure this is the way in Indiana and other places, there's a shortage of not only teachers but coaches, because I mean, let's face it, coaches, you have all this second job and you may not be getting paid. You may get a small stipend.
It's
So
like
really
$2,000-$3,000 stipend on top of the teacher salary or something.
It's crazy, right? And then so now we have the shortage of coaches, and then there's the replenishment of that. The influx is not there. So you have this, so you have the shortage of coaches everywhere. So you think about how that's contributing to the development or undevelopment of young people, not just physically in terms of in their sports skills, but in terms of their mental, emotional, and social development, which I'm big on as well too. So we had this mission of supporting coaches, and we started this veteran coaching program to help create a vehicle, and we partnered with if you guys don't know them, Soldiers of Sidelines, another great program. Yep. They do some work with us and the Bears and other NFL teams. But like same thing with refs, right? Like who wants to being a ref's like being a cop now. Who wants to be a ref? Because like, am I going to endure that type of abuse? And I don't know. And so there was somebody asked me if I ever wanted to be a ref, and I was like, hell no, But now I see how important they are in order to be able to grow the game, because I'm a rugby coach, and I've been a USA Rugby certified coach for a while. It's another long story but my son plays rugby. I love rugby as a game. We have a great program here, one of the best youth programs in the country. Our high school boys program is #1 in the country. I'm working with them on Saturday as they get ready to go to the national tournament. But
nice.
I see my coaches who are refs and how they're able to teach the game and enforce the rules at the same time. And I just think it's so cool to do that. Unfortunately, I'm not able to coach and do my full-time job and commute to Chicago at the same time. But I definitely want to do that because I just think refs are so important, and we're losing them, by the thousands by the day. And so, which we can get into why that is. But I just think it's so cool that you guys are doing that, and to create opportunities to be able to replenish the supply of leaders and mentors that our young people need so much.
And you said it. I mean, it's you're giving back to the community. It's not just for the ref. It's so much for the community, the kids.
100%.
We can't lose our sports programs.
So we like to do a rule of the day segment on here. But so, Andy, my question to you for both players and officials. So obviously there's missed calls, right?
Yeah.
So do you, in your teachings and you're working with athletes, do you discuss how they bounce back, like kind of the next play mentality? Is there like a way you kind of talk that through with them at all, or is that maybe not? But as an official, like I know I've made calls that I want back and I can't get them back. Is there something we can kind of teach, so a new veteran so also Vets to Ref includes first responders. So police officers, firemen, all EMTs, those guys are just amazing, and women. Right. And so any of those we want to bring into the officiating realm.
Yeah.
So we know that they have really the strong mental capacity for it, but you beat yourself up. You missed the call. Right. It might affect the whole game. Is there something we can kind of give them to think about as far as staying strong?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things too, I just got on a bunch of my players because they're, and the coaches for that matter too. We were in a tournament earlier in the season, and we had some refs, that we're having a rough day, and these guys had, the coaches obviously were doing their body language and their displeasure with this ref who was a young female high schooler, and then the players started focusing on like that. So you saw how it cascaded the players, and they're just sitting there on the sideline yapping about the refs. And and I don't raise my voice with young people very often, but I got on them. It's, to me, that's like, you got to speak softly and carry a big stick. And obviously, when I raise my voice, like command voice, like, it gets people's attention, right? And so I pulled the knife hand out. You appreciate that, Bill? And I was like, hey, stop complaining about the refs and control how your attitude and your behaviors. That's all you control. It's like your remote control, on your video game console. You control your A and B button. That's it. Kind of like the old Nintendo back in the day, And so it's
still have one.
Button. Yeah, remember the Super Nintendo? It's all we had is the A and B button, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, and imagine there's only forward. You can't go backwards, right? So, hey, if you want to move forward, you got to play present. You control your A and your B buttons, how you think and how you respond in any situation, right? And another thing I would add in there too is that there's think about this there's stoplight thinking, right? We think about green light thinking is positive, or the way that we talk to ourselves in terms of our attitude, in terms of being productive, in terms of how we respond to situation. There's the red light thinking, right? And that's negativity, and that's stuff that we are inner critical or analytical and judgmental. And there's another type of thinking, it's called neutral thinking. And this comes from Trevor Moawad. That's where we accept things for what they are. And we try to look at things objectively, and then we take the next best step towards a small victory, right? Whatever that is too. And so being positive is not always the answer, right? Hey, if you lose, hey, when people are positive and green light thinking if you lose a game, that's frowned upon, right? But continue to spiral downward after you make a back play. So the way to shift to more productive thinking is to go from red light thinking to yellow light thinking. And there's some ways that you could do that in terms of how you think and how you can respond. And so I love to tell coaches about the controller, the A and B button, and the stop and the traffic light. And when they start to understand that, they start to control themselves. And then you really, for coaches out there, it's not, and refs, it's not necessarily about what you say, it's how you act, because your kids and players are watching you. And actually, when you think about it, effective communication, over half of it's nonverbal. So if you're demonstrating the right behaviors, the kids are going to watch it. So I just gave you an example of my situation where that was red light thinking, red light behaviors cascaded to the players. And so once the coach has shifted to neutral, the players shifted to neutral and really doubled down to be able to play present and play the next play. And there's a whole bunch of other strategies, if we have more time, that I get into players on, hey, how to really play present and play one play at a time. But I would recommend, I would start with those two things.
That's perfect. That's what we were looking for. So Liz, you want to go to Beyond the Bench and talk some recruiting?
Yes, I was going to say, I love your sign that says, get comfortable being uncomfortable. We actually just had a conversation with Dr. T about that last week on our last episode.
Oh, nice. Teresa was on the pod. Okay, good deal. Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah.
And she gave some great tips to our recruits. And so I wanted to ask you, since mental performance is growing, and I'm sure some of these large schools have a mental performance program, but if you were a recruit these days, what do you think is a good question for a recruit to ask coaches about? Do they have a mental performance program? And if they don't, how do they handle these situations with them?
Yeah, I think it's just understanding, I think it's asking a good way to enter in that kind of say, hey, what are the resources for my mental health and wellness, right? And so, because when you look at psychology, there's this spectrum, and I can give you guys a graphic. I describe it as a bridge, right? A lot of people don't understand this. This is important for young people and parents, especially as you're going on the recruiting trail, right? I think it's important for everybody. You think of this bridge we all walk on as the human experience, right? And it goes from surviving on the one side, which is about mental health and about treating pathology and anxiety and depression. That's the medical model, right? When I'm sick, I go see a doctor, right? And the doctor on the psychological side is, can be a psychologist or psychiatrist, maybe it could be a licensed counselor of some sort, right? There's the medical side right there that most schools have to have for both students and student athletes. And they may have additional resources in the building, and then that helps us move to the, almost like the athletic training side, which is in the middle of the bridge, which is the coping band. And that's where we spend most of our time, actually. And that's coping, as we think of resilience and grit and being able to be hard to break, and so in that side, a counselor may be able to help you out with that as well too. Then there's the performance band, and this is what they may not have, and it's not as prevalent. Like I said, the Bears are one of the few NFL franchises that has them. If the NFL franchise does not have a lot of mental performance coaches like me, you may go to a school, to where they have a great sports psychology program academically, but for whatever reason, your coach hasn't bought into it, and they are not even asking the people who are right across campus to come over and work with their players. Now, that's a whole nother discussion. But that performance band is really important, right? Because we're talking about, it's helping you execute tasks at the upper range of your potential. It's really helping you with your on the field performance, right? What you're talking about. And there's a lot that goes into that too. Now, not every medical professional has the ability to do the performance work, but a mental performance coach, I'm like the strength and conditioning coach for the brain. I am not, because I'm not licensed in a state. I don't deal with the psychopathology. I don't deal with the mental illness and injury. I am a trained counselor. I have a certification to be able to help with the prevention side. So like with the Bears, Carla Suber and we span that whole spectrum of the bridge, and that's how we refer in between. And that's how we can meet the player wherever they are and get where they need to go. So I think arming parents and players with that bridge concept, which has to do with continuity of care on the psychological side, will help you understand, like, what do they have and how can that person help me? Right. It's not just, okay, so do they have anybody? Well, no. Well, then what resources do I have available that maybe through my insurance to help out with that? What does the school have outside of the athletic building? What do they have internal to that? And then how can that person meet me where I'm at? Because I'm going to go back and forth on that bridge a lot as an athlete. We go back and forth on that bridge a lot, sometimes in a day, let alone a lifetime. But having that continuity care and knowing what the resources are to meet me where I'm at and get me where I need to go psychologically is as important, if not more important, than the physical side. But it's not as prevalent. So you need to be informed and understand what's out there. You can ask the right questions.
Because I literally asked these two if there was a spectrum that we should discuss, and you just laid it out perfectly. I just feel like it gets a little dangerous if you throw everything in its mental health and that's everything. A lot of people don't understand either that there's even two sides, let alone maybe a three band on that bridge. That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's super important to me. My field, so sports psychology, is starting to, when I first started, we were really, it's the mental health side. We don't deal with that. And now we're starting to be more open to it. And it's still very divisive. And I will tell you, there are people who are licensed practitioners. They look down their nose at people like me. And, because they're like, I'm not licensed, right? But then they think that they can do the applied work on the field and then they can't. But, so it's really about, it's an interdisciplinary approach that's complementary, right? And that's what I'm so blessed to work with people like I do, is because it's like, hey, it's not about you versus me. It's about, hey, how can we be there to support the player the best that we can, and knowing your limitations and your boundaries, but also get in my lane a little bit so we can do what's best for the people we're serving.
And on top of that, I guess, so there's, the stigma behind mental health, and we're trying to overcome that. Do you find that from the players, that they feel that maybe you're on that same realm and they're not as willing, or maybe they're more open to you because it's more of a performance?
Yeah, it's a great question, because it's interesting. From my time as an athlete to the military career, it's just starkly different, right? And it's, Bill remembers, we didn't even call it mental health. We called it behavioral health because it was so stigmatized. There's no way in hell that I would have saw, and had my coach not referred me to the CEP, I wouldn't have gone and seen him. And even then I didn't tell anybody about it because I didn't want anybody to think I was messed up, right? Or I had a problem. And again, because we associate with problems and fixing problems only, which is very reactive and limited, right? But I think nowadays, especially and again, the pandemic, there was not a lot of good that came out of it. One of the things that was good, it was this awareness of how important mental health was for all of us, because we all experienced it in real time with each other. And now I see this generation to where they're so open to this idea of training your brain like your body and your craft. And And also from my perspective as a practitioner, we know more about the brain in the last 20 years than we've known in the last 200 years. And from the measurement to understanding how to be able to change the physiology and psychology of the brain, how that affects your performance. Thankfully, we've had so many marquee athletes who not only are talking about when their struggles and how they've sought help, but also people like Kobe Bryant and Michael Phelps and Simone Biles who are talking about seeing people like me, and it brought us to the forefront of how important we are to their development, not only as players, as people. So what I see is a big time openness, right? Now we're not there yet, right? I still go into every organization and I will tell you it's that standard distribution, that bell curve, right? 10% get it and love it because they probably have worked with someone like me or have studied on their own in college, for example, in the NFL, or they've had exposure to this, which is also kind of, there's a lot of people out there talking about it, which is cool on social media. But then, there's 10% that don't want nothing to do with it. And they're not going to come see me, even if I was just giving them bags of cash, right? Not that they need that at my level, right? But still, they're not going to, hey, they won't touch me with a 10-foot pole, right? And then everyone else is somewhere in between, about 80%, 70-80%, they're somewhere in the middle. They're on the fence. They're open. But so my goal is to try to continue to get as many, utilize the people on the front end to pull the players, to the right, and through trust and rapport and good tutorship, pull them to the right, and so that's always my goal, to be able to do that. And I think the second thing is getting the coaches to buy in. So one of the reasons deliberately why I have this leadership role is because now I am tied to the coaching staff, right? And so I'm around them because they're the ones who reinforce this, right? It's just like being a consultant in a business, right? I come in and I give them the razzle dazzle and I do this speech or pitch in this workshop and whatever. It's ultimately the supervisors who are reinforcing it on a day-to-day basis. So if the leadership, the first line supervisors aren't reinforcing this, then nothing else you're doing matters, in my opinion.
All right, so we're gonna start off with the Walk On Warrior segment over here. Little throwback to my walk on to the Ball State. At the same time, you were starting over there at the West Point area. No big deal. So I think you answered one of my questions already, but if I've got a couple folks that might be listening who are exercise science students, perhaps over at Ball State. What recommendations do you have to them on getting into the mental performance side, or what things can they do? Maybe not in school, say they volunteer for a team or something like that.
Sure.
How can they look into this field?
Yeah, I think if they're interested too, I think the best thing to be able to do is, find people who are already doing it, right? And so if it's me or somebody else that hey, you find that's out there, and there's a million of them on LinkedIn and Instagram alone, right? You see someone who's who's doing the work, right? And is already in the field. Is reaching out to them and asking them, hey, what's a day in a life like? How did you get to where you did? What did you study, right? Because it's all about knowledge, the skills, and the experience, right? So knowledge is super important, right? And having the right education is super important too, right? And there's a bunch of different vehicles to be able to do that, whether it's in traditional programs, at the undergrad or graduate level. I will tell you don't have to have. It helps to be like an undergrad degree, in some sort of psychology but I'm usually housed in the kinesiology department. But even if you're a sports management undergrad, and let's face it, undergrads don't know what the hell they want to do when they grow up. I know I didn't. I was going to be an Army officer, right? And so,
I still don't know.
Yeah, and so we're still figuring it out, right? And we're all works in progress. But hey, maybe you're out and you're in your first job and you're like, man, I really want to get back into sports, do some of the sports. Maybe I want to study this field. Hey, and maybe you want to look at a program, right? You start looking into the master's degree programs as well too that are out there. I recommend using the ASP website, the Association for Applied Sports Psychology website. It's a phenomenal resource because that's my governing body, because they have recommended schools that are both brick and mortar or online. Maybe reaching out to some of their academic advisors that are in charge of that as well too. We have an annual conference as well. I think that's that's where I would start. The American Psychological Association also has a division dedicated to sports, Division 47, but also with tactical populations, because I met a lot of people who are veterans who are like, man, I want to get out, I want to continue to be able to work with, and I've done a lot of work with, when I say tactical, emergency services, so fire, police, talking about people who are 911 dispatchers, even people who are working on some of the federal law enforcement side or three-letter agencies. There's a lot, or go back and work with the DoD, with the military. There's a lot of great opportunities there. And so working with those divisions will tell you, like, hey, what does performance psychology look like working with tactical populations versus athletics? And which level of athletics do I really want to specialize in? So those are some things. Those are just some ways that I would start. But you can reach out to me. I mean, I'll do my best to respond to you. Follow me on LinkedIn. For my Kung Fu is the strongest. Thanks for following me. You and 3 other people, Bill.
That Kung Fu game is strong. Would you recommend the sports world or the sports realm as a great place to get in? And could you touch on the community and how that team feel is still there, as we get out of the military?
I think for me, going into pro sports is hard. I'm going to tell you right now too. And I think if you're assuming you're going to walk out of the military and go right into a pro sports team, either doing what I did, or I even had a guy reach out to me too, they want to do as a speaker, it's going to be hard to do that. Right. I think, again, that's where you got to put your white belt on and be willing to go put in the work, and then use your network to your advantage. Right. And so I think what I would do is there's obviously your organization, and if you're interested in reffing, but also Soldiers of Sidelines is a great opportunity. They have free seminars, free workshops. They have a phenomenal network. I'd recommend them too. We do some work with them with the Bears. We actually have, we're planning on doing an actual event with them again this year, which I'm really excited about. Another one I would take a look at too is the Veterans Coaching Program at Texas A&M. That's specifically if you're interested in coming to Texas and you want to back to school at one of our 11 campuses at Texas A&M, gig them. And then you also, maybe you want to go at the high school level or junior college level to try to, maybe as a volunteer, but also hey, there's a bunch of different vehicles. Maybe you want to be a strength coach. So another one I'd recommend as a strength coach as well too. Maybe you're into the health and human performance side as well too, is gosh, I'm forgetting their name right now too. They're trying to talk and think at the same time. I'll think about it in the show notes. There's one in Bentonville, Arkansas. Their name is dropping me right now too, but they're a great organization where they do opportunities to kind of come in to do in-house a residence program for 2 weeks. I'll think about it in a minute. We can put it in the show notes.
All good.
But there's several programs that are out there that are free or low cost for you to be able to get some time. I highly recommend using the DoD Skills Bridge to intern with some programs to just get the opportunity, because again, you want to close the gap between being unconsciously incompetent to becoming at least consciously incompetent, to where you don't know, where you decide you want to go, I want to pursue this or not. And the last thing I'll say is hey, you don't become a coach or get into athletics to be rich, right? You just don't, even at the professional level, right? It's so because again, it's not something that's mainstream, and it's really hard to make a living and do it well. There's very few people who are just crushing it in my field, frankly. So you have to have a love and passion for continuing to serve and give back, because, I would say it's got to be purpose over profit, to be completely honest with you too. So if you want to continue to be a purpose over profit person, then this field, either sports psychology, coaching, or something with health and human performance, may be for you, because it just, I can't think of it fills my cup in ways I can't even begin to describe.
Yep. And if you're seeking for some purpose and you're just lost, well, log on to vets2refs.com and take a look. Maybe right up your avenue.
On the vets to ref side of things, having a purpose when you get back out of the military, or if you're a first responder and, it's a daily grind, and then having that purpose of just seeing a sporting event that night, you're going to be the official, it's the biggest game in town. It's really an honor to be out there with those kids performing. So it's just another way for our veterans and our first responders to have a purpose. And we all know having a purpose keeps us motivated. And, Andy, you got a great purpose going, and it sounds like you're really killing it, and you're bringing these guys into the line, they're in the limelight, and you're teaching them to just keep grinding and pushing forward. So it's really been a privilege to talk to you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. And just a quick note: University of Health and Performance is the name of the program too. But yeah, I appreciate that, Jeb. And my comment to that is, I mean, don't think that I, retired from the military and then I went in and started, living this big league dream. Believe me, there's a lot of failure. There's a lot of iteration. I got fired. I quit. I started my own business. I struggled. All those things, and it took me a lot of trial and error to get where I'm at. And I still haven't figured it out. I still don't have it figured out, but if you're willing to, so if you think you're going to get out of the military, and you're going to go find your dream job that you're going to be in again for the rest of your life, I mean, that's not a very realistic expectation. But if you have a strong purpose, what your mission is, your values and who you are as a person, and you're willing to iterate and learn, then good things are going to happen. And eventually, you're going to find that purpose will help you find your passion. And that's my example, is through trial and error.
That is so great. And we do have one question that we ask all of our guests. And that is, what is your favorite sporting event that you've ever attended or played in? And if you can't think of one, what is your goal sporting event to attend?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So my favorite one my favorite one that I played in was obviously the Army Navy game. I mean, it's just really hard to beat the Army Navy game. Even though we lost the game to Navy, 100 Army Navy game was really, really special, just because.
Hey, Andy, not to steal your thunder there, but I'll never forget, I was at my cousin's wedding, and I was going to leave the next day, and that game was coming on. And I saw Brendan kicking off the 100th Army Navy game, and dude, I was just sitting on the bed in the hotel room bawling. Like, this is just the most amazing thing I've ever seen, man. After growing up all the years watching that game, and then to see him in there, so
that's really, really special to me too. I will say that probably toss up in terms of the game that I ever attended, like watched as a spectator. I mean, for me, like, I love going to ball games with my dad, growing up too. So there's so many great memories there. But, going to Wrigley Field for this first time and watching the game, that was pretty special, especially going there with some friends after I graduated from West Point. And that was pretty special as well too. And then I think going to Notre Dame Stadium, like I told you, describe, because it's just on my mind. I mean, I grew up a Notre Dame fan, and watching that game, and then being able to go in afterwards and get in a tour of the locker room, that it was like a kind of a pinch me moment too, as well too. And then the last one, obviously Soldier Field. Being with the Bears and being on the sidelines for the house that Hallis built, being a soldier in Soldier Field and being on the sidelines.
And knowing how
that sounds hard to beat.
That's freaking hard. How can you not be excited about that too? Because it just was like, it was very much like, hey man, this is a full circle moment for me. So
that's awesome. All three great answers. I can't wait to see you on the sideline this first game. I'll be watching the Bears. We'll be pulling for them.
Yeah, thanks guys. Appreciate it too. Hopefully we'll have. I'm really excited about the draft coming up, and I'm really excited about where we are. And now it's just translating that and executing on the field, man. Everything else is coming along too. Now, just hey, we just got to do one thing at a time, right? Play present, one thing at a time, and the rest will take care of itself.
One at a time.
You too, and thanks for everyone who's tuned in. Who's not my mom,
or our mom,
or my wife.
Yeah. Hi, Mom.
Or she doesn't listen to me anyways.